All right, so you're thinking about investing in short-term rentals, but you have no idea where to start. This is the Realtors Playbook. So I'm Matt Witte. I'm with Sean Bakhtiari. We're both realtors. We're going to give you some tips. Sean is definitely the expert in this field. I am just the guinea pig that happens to own a couple short-term rentals, and I'll tell you some of the pitfalls that I ran into. So Sean, want to give us a little background about yourself and your short-term rental and management experience?
Sure. Thank you for having me on the podcast. So I've been investing in short-term rentals for about 7 years now. Prior to being involved in real estate in any capacity, I worked in corporate finance in Boston for a asset management company. So while I was working in Boston full time in corporate America, I had a number of marketing and sales and client experience roles. But I knew early on in my finance career that I was probably not cut out to climb the corporate ladder. Not that it's a bad thing by any means. It just didn't really fit my vision. So when I was working full time in corporate America, I bought my first short term rental in Hampton. Then a year later, I bought my second short term rental, also in Hampton. Then I casually created a short term rental management company called Seacoast Vacation Rentals. Today we manage 70 short term rentals. Anyways, long story short, it got to a point where I was ready to take a risk, leave my corporate job, pursue building a short-term rental management company, pursue building my own portfolio. I never had plans to get licensed as a licensed realtor at the time, but now, of course, I'm licensed in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And I guess it's evolved to where I am today, where I own 7 short-term rentals, manage a total of 60 with Seacoast Vacation Rentals. I now have a business partner, Chris Petsy, who's amazing, and he runs the show basically for Seacoast Vacation Rentals. And then on top of that, I'm a licensed realtor in Massachusetts, New Hampshire.
Wow, that's quite a handful right there. And it's great that you have that expertise because I think our listeners are going to really want to hear that. So I guess the first question is if someone's looking to purchase a short-term rental, where do they look? Why did you pick Hampton? I mean, I have some ideas, but I want to hear it from your perspective.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess I'll start with like my own personal mindset. When I bought my first short-term rental, this is my personal mindset. Maybe people can relate to it. I wanted to invest in some place that I was familiar with, some place that was close enough that I could shoot over in the instance that I couldn't find someone to help. Today, my mindset's a lot different. But again, when I first started out, I wanted to invest in a place that that I knew and liked, a place that was pretty close to me, in a place where if the worst case scenario happened to happen, which was it wasn't renting, then I'd still own a place that I could enjoy with family and friends. So that was like my very basic mindset with my first short-term rental about 7 years ago. That's my best short-term rental. It just happens to be the best one that I had bought in hindsight. Today is a much more challenging market to try to find really solid cash flowing short-term rental investments. So as a short-term rental investor today, your mindset needs to be a lot different than 2, 3, 4 years ago because prices are higher and rates are higher and inventory is low. So there's just fewer opportunities. Today, I'm looking to invest in places that are in markets that I think are going to appreciate over time. I don't necessarily need as much cash flow today as I was looking for, again, 2, 3, 4 years ago, because the market's completely different. But if I can find a property that's in a good, growing, developing market that will at least cover its expenses while rental rates, I think, will grow over time, then I'm going to be happy because that's going to be an asset that should either cover costs and or cash flow a little bit in year one, grow in the cash flow in the next several years, but also, most importantly, it'll be in a market that I'm really bullish about, where most real estate will, in my opinion, rise over time. And to me, those local markets are New Hampshire Seacoast and the New Hampshire Lakes and Mountains region. So locally, those are my favorite markets right now.
Awesome. And my story's a lot different than yours. I have a friend that lives has a house down in Cape Cod, and he was running as a short-term rental, and he's not a he's not a realtor. He looked at me and said, "Why don't you buy a short-term rental?" And I thought, I'm a little impulsive, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. I have a license. I could figure this out, right? So I started looking for about a year, and we ended up seeing a house in Dennisport come on the market on Sunday. Now, I had driven down there quite a bit on my own, just kind of scoping out neighborhoods, talking to realtors. And the realtors down there told me if a property comes on let's say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, all the New Yorkers, people from Connecticut, they're all coming Friday and Saturday, and you're in trouble once they get there because they love to pour their money into Cape Cod. So this property, oddly enough, came on a Sunday, which we know is pretty rare. And I saw it, and I brought my wife over, and I said, she goes, "What are we doing?" I said, "We're going to buy this house." And she goes, "That's great. When are we going to see it?" I go, "We're not." I said, "We have to get it now. It won't be here, you know?" So we ended up buying it sight unseen. We did have a home inspection. And
Wow,
you
good for you.
probably remember, what's that?
So wow, good for you.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. But you probably remember March 2020 when the world was going to end with COVID. It was kind of a scary time, right? Everyone was like, we don't know what's going to happen. And we're under contract right at that time. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, the market's going to crash. This is it. This is the unexpected market crash. So we ended up just pushing forward. We were like, what's the worst thing that could happen, right, at this point? So that was kind of our experiment with short-term rental. And we did that for a few summers, and we did very, very well down there. So if anybody's thinking about short-term rentals, I think Cape Cod is an amazing area. That's not, you don't have to get an airplane or anything. And a lot of properties come furnished, which Sean knows and I know. If you want to buy a house in Andover, the bank is not going to allow you to buy it furnished. You have to do a
Hmm.
bill of sale and everything else. Cape Cod, they allow that. So it's definitely a good option. The rental income down there is amazing. But we got to a point, Sean, where our son's a little bit older. We want to use it a little bit more. So we're not renting it anymore. But like you kind of said, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? We could use it,
I lo-
family, friends.
yeah, I love that story because, like you, I'm also a little impulsive. Not to say that's necessarily a good thing, but I will say, on the contrary, if you overanalyze, you're never going to take action. And I work with so many people who want to invest in short-term rentals or long-term rentals, and they're all well intentioned to get into the real estate investing arena. But some people, to their fault, will overanalyze to a point where they just take no action, and then it's been 3 years since they've done anything. And in hindsight, had they just taken a little bit of action 3 years ago, they'd be in a really good position today. So I think you have to be someplace in the middle. You don't want to be over impulsive, like I might be sometimes, but you don't want to overanalyze. And I think the way to avoid overanalyzing to the point where you have like analysis paralysis is just working with a really skilled local realtor who knows that niche. When I bought my first several short-term rentals, I couldn't find a realtor in my area that could intelligently talk about the short-term rental opportunities and how to analyze a property and what the rents could be and what systems and people to use in my management process. This was 8 years ago before Airbnb was as big as it is today. So I pretty much self-taught myself, and I think over time it's evolved to my reputation of being like somewhat of a short-term rental guy. But
Hmm.
there's short-term rental guys and girls in any market. If you can find somebody who's invested like you have, or like I have, or like many other people now have, work with those types of realtors because they can intelligently walk you through the process and help you analyze, tell you the types of risks that might be involved, the pros and cons of different markets, the local regulatory risks that are now becoming more prevalent. So I think that's one way to try to expedite the analysis that some people might be caught up in.
Yeah, it's well said though, and diving right in. So it can be dangerous sometimes, but if you play games with your mind too long, you may never jump in at all. I think that's well said, and I think you said you have, is it 7 short-term rentals? Is that right?
Yeah, so I have seven: two in Hampton Beach, two in Myrtle Beach, two in Salisbury Beach, one in Cape Coral, Florida, in the Fort Myers area.
Very good. Okay, so you're right down all the way down the East Coast into Florida, and so I'll
Yeah,
play. I was
go
gonna
ahead, I
say
cut you off.
I'm gonna yeah, that's okay. I'm gonna play a little bit difficult with you. So a buyer comes in, says, Sean, it's easy for you to say you have all these short-term rentals because you bought when the rates were low. So I guess the first question is, what's the last one did you buy? The last one you bought. You don't need to tell us the rate if you don't want to, but the last one that you bought, and how does that compare to maybe one that you bought earlier with a different rate? Is the rate double? Is it one and a half? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me start off by saying last year was the first year since I started where I didn't buy a short-term rental. Not
Okay.
because I didn't want to add a short-term rental to my portfolio, but because last year I made what I would say is a mature decision to not reinvest my proceeds into another property, but instead reinvest my proceeds into securing my current portfolio. So the funds that I could have used to acquire another property was put towards building my reserves account, was put towards like working with attorneys to build a trust and was put towards added insurance. So I decided last year, and I think the environment played into that decision too, because it was just a tougher environment to find great deals. So last year was the first year I didn't add to my portfolio. Instead, I built a moat around it to try to protect it. To answer your question, my most recent purchase was a two-family in Salisbury Beach in December of 2022. So just a little over a year ago. December 2022, I closed on a two-family in Salisbury Beach. They were asking $700,000 for, it was basically a flip, a two-bedroom, one-bath over a two-bedroom, one-bath on a double lot, one block to the beach on the south side of the center. I love Salisbury Beach. I think it's another good growing market that's ripe for development. And my brother and I invest together, so we ended up offering those sellers like $710,000, waived home inspection, less than 24 hours it's been on the market. I saw it once and we said, we'll waive the home inspection. We're going to give you over asking price and we want to buy it furnished. And it was staged basically, but it was staged fairly nicely. So we maybe overpaid. We maybe paid more than most people would have been comfortable doing. I think our rate was like high fives, probably like 5.9, 5.9 or something. But we analyzed the property and we projected that each unit, top and bottom, should do between $50,000 and $60,000 in gross income each, for a total of 100,000. What's the math? 120,000.
Yep.
Anyway, whatever the math comes out to. Over the course of the year. And so after estimating what our expenses would be and projecting the income, we felt comfortable. And that property has proved in its first full year last year to be a really good property that I think will continue to be better with as the years go by. Now, I will say, we waived the home inspection and there were some issues. So that's the risk you take. Like the risk we took was we're going to waive this home inspection on a flip, hope that things are good that we can't see, and we're just going to take that risk and pay the money if we need to later. And the risk was there were some plumbing issues. There were some water heater issues. We had to open up some walls. So I don't regret waiving the home inspection because I got what I think is going to be a good long-term investment for us. But it came with some risk, and that's the risk you take sometimes when you waive a home inspection.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the home inspection issues were. That's interesting. So here's one for you. So you manage these properties with your management company. Would you recommend someone self-manage? So let's say I bought a property in Hampton, so I'm close enough to Hampton. Would you recommend that someone self-manage, or do you think it's potentially a dangerous situation to get into as you're just starting out?
No, so even though I co-own a short-term rental management company, I always tell my clients that I encourage you to self-manage yourself from the start. So the first year you own the property, you should at least try to self-manage, because when you hire a management company, it costs money. You pay a fee to the management company, which eats into your net income. Some people's goal might not be to maximize their net income. It might be to own a second home or a vacation home that's completely hands-off and completely passive, and they just want to earn as much income as possible through a manager passively, while also being able to use it themselves. And in that instance, there's a number of different management companies that you could consider using locally, and that might make more sense. But for many quote-unquote investors that are really looking to cash flow as much as possible and earn as much as possible, that I tell them, you're better off attempting to self-manage, see if you like it, see if you're good at it. After 1 year, if you don't like it or you're not good at it, then hire a good local professional, but at least you gave it a shot. It's just that today, again, with high prices, higher interest rates, it's hard to find cash flowing deals without a property manager. But then when you add the management fee on top of that, then it's really difficult. I don't want to say impossible, because it's not, but it's just extra difficult to find a cash flowing short-term rental investment. But again, back to a point that I didn't make yet. What I've learned is that as a short-term rental investor, you don't get rich off cash flow. That's just good extra income to hopefully to reinvest into your portfolio or into the property. In my opinion, you get wealthy over long-term appreciation. So this is what I've learned over the last several years. Cash flow is great. Cash flow allows you to hold on to properties for a long time over good and bad markets. But the real wealth is just holding on to these properties for 5, 10, 15 plus years and just experiencing that appreciation over the long term, and then maybe selling or 1031 exchanging into the next property. So that maybe answers your question, but I always encourage
no, it does.
self-manage if you can.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I self-managed Cape Cod for the short term that we did rent it. But I did on the back burner, I had, quote unquote handyman that had access to roofers, plumbers, electricians. So I didn't have to drive down there if there was an issue. So he could handle that. So, but I'd pay him as we go. It wasn't contracted in terms of, well, he gets 20% of rental, fees or anything like that. So it was just, kind of like a mom and pop guy. So he was good. I have another short term, I should say we have another short term rental property in Central Florida near Disney. And that is 100% professionally managed. It's just not possible. And that's why I kind of said if you were close to Hampton, right, you can get there, you can handle it. But, you have one in Florida. That's, to me, is a challenge. Like, I don't want any part of that. I don't want calls at midnight. I don't want issues that they can't get into the property. It's a gated community, so they can't get past the gate. I just have to eat those fees. It's just part of it. And I like what you said, because if listeners are hearing this and they run the numbers with Sean and Sean says, look, you might just break even. You're just not going to have any money coming in. And it's easy to say, well, that's not a good investment. Maybe it is, because if you bought that short-term rental in 2021, even not even 2020, 2021, and you've had it for 3 years, you had a massive surge. In most parts of the country, depends, there's some outliers, but for the most part, you've had a very, very good surge. And if you happen to dabble in stocks a little bit, the last thing I do, when I buy a stock, I've never sold a stock for a loss ever. Okay, as the great Kiyosaki says, it's not a loss unless you've sold it for the loss. So I remember, for instance, buying Bank of America at $19 a share. It dropped to $3, absolutely plummeted. And I said, Bank of America is going to have to go out of business because I'm not selling it. And if you check the stock now, it's fine, right? It's no big deal. So I think I look at real estate the same way, right? You might see, the ebbs and flows a little bit. I don't necessarily think people need to panic if it's not hemorrhaging their account. Like if they're like, all right, we're okay. All right, we had a bad year. Maybe we'll write off some losses, so on and so forth. We'll depreciate the property. It's not killing us right now. It is, I like you said, it's 10, 15-year investment over time. You're going to do really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, especially in today's market where people, maybe less experienced investors, they just expect to find cash flowing deals, and again, they do exist. You have to be patient. You have to know the right people. Maybe you find them off market. Maybe you source them off market. They exist, but they're far and few between compared to a few years ago. So that's why the influx of new short-term rentals in all these markets has slowed down drastically, is just because there's less deals to be had versus 2, 3, 4 years ago. And that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's probably healthy for the market. And for those people that do own short-term rentals, now there's going to be less of an influx of new competition, again, which is a good thing. But if you're creative, if you're well connected, you will find good deals. And I myself hope to also invest in new property this year, but I'm going to be patient. I'm going to help the clients I'm working with as well. I've had a couple clients actually already close. It's March now. I've probably had a handful of clients close this year on their new short-term rentals, and they're psyched. 12 months from now, they'll see exactly how the first year was, of course, but they seem to be off to a good start, and they get to use them and enjoy them themselves, and they get to own these assets for hopefully a long time, and they will, again, likely appreciate if held for a long time.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and I like your chances over the long haul. There's not necessarily need to panic if you see, potential correction in the market. As long as you're able to.
Sorry, here's one more point that I think is really important. Actually, is and you probably know this yourself, owning a couple yourself with short-term rentals. People always ask me like why I like short-term rentals versus long-term rentals. For example, I like how you can have some control over the performance of your short-term rental. Whereas a long-term rental, the rents you get will more than not just be what the market is providing. So your long-term rentals, for the most part, are in line with market rents. With short-term rentals, your rental income can be based on a number of things. It can be based on, number one, how well is it managed? How well is it priced? How unique of a design and a concept you're providing? What amenities you're providing to your guests? How good your reviews are? How quickly you respond to inquiries? So the ability to have control over the outcome of the short-term rentals performance, to me, is something that I love, because you could add value. I think, personal opinion, you could add more value in a short-term rental if you're creative and skilled and are a good operator, versus with a long-term rental, which have their own benefits. There's just less ways, I think, to affect the performance of a long-term rental when compared to a short-term rental.
Great. That's a great point. I'm going to go down this rabbit hole for a minute. The three families, long term, two families, those are fine, right? But Sean and I can tell you horror stories where renters refuse to leave and they refuse to pay, and it could take you 12 months to get them out. People vacationing in Hampton aren't going to refuse to leave. It just doesn't happen. I mean, it could, but on a short-term rental, I've never had someone say, "Good luck, get me out." It just doesn't happen. Now, we both work in real estate offices, and between the two of us, I'm sure we could tell you stories where renters, during COVID said, and they had employment. I'm not talking about people that were struggling. I'm talking about people that had employment that were told, "Oh, I don't have to pay rent anymore. So now I'm not gonna," or even after COVID, I'm just not paying rent anymore, and then you get into the property, finally, it's in terrible condition. So I had one friend that was trying to get renters out. He's like, "Man, I'm trying to get them out. I don't know how to get them out. The lease is up. They won't leave." I said, "Give them $5,000 to leave. Just give them the money and call it a day, because it's going to take forever." And it's good. You've heard that, Sean, right? Cash for keys. Banks used to do it all the time, right? If they were foreclosing, they'd say, "Hey, here's $5,000. Just pack up. Don't even pack up. Just leave. Just get out of the house." And the banks aren't stupid. They know, like, all right, for $5,000, it's going to be worth it. Short-term rentals, that's one really nice thing, right? They're going to leave on Saturday. It's, we've never had any issues. I don't know if you've had any issues with that, but I've never had anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know if lucky is the right word, but I'll use it. I've been lucky enough not to have any issues with tenants not leaving. But another one of the things I like about short-term rentals is that for people who stay at your property, they're not signing leases. They're signing contracts. And so when there's a rental lease, first of all, I'm not an attorney, so consult your own attorney for proper legal advice. But it's my understanding that when you sign a rental lease, it protects the tenant more than it does the homeowner. So it's much harder to get tenants out when for whatever reason, they're not getting out. But with short-term rentals, there's no leases. They're contracts on Airbnb and Vrbo, just for example. And in the unlikely event you have a bad guest that has a 7-night stay, you need to get them out after 2 nights. I've been in a position where I've forced them out with the local cops. It has happened maybe twice in 7 years. But the risk of tenants not leaving is less with short-term rentals than it is in long-term rentals, in my experience. And that's just another reason why I've come to like short-term rentals a lot.
Yeah, 100% agree. So, Sean, how do people reach out to you if they want to search for short-term rentals or Seacoast properties, or looking for a property manager?
So you could either search my name on Google, Sean Bakhtiari, or go to seanbakhtiari.com. Or if you want to go directly to my property management company's website, you could search Seacoast Vacation Rentals.
Awesome.
Yeah, we now have 2 property management companies. We just created a sister company in the New England mountains region. So we're operating now in the New Hampshire mountains and the Vermont mountains, and we're growing our portfolio and presence in those 2 regions, because to us, they're just such desirable places for people to go on vacation. So we're now both along the general North Shore and New Hampshire Seacoast areas, and in the New Hampshire mountains area too.
Awesome, man. Sean, you're taking over New England here, one state at a time. So thank you so much for joining us today. This was great information. I know I learned a lot by listening to you, and I'm sure listeners that are starting to dig into short-term rental, this will be a good start for them.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. This was a pleasure.
Okay, awesome. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.